You know, Teddy wasn't around in 2017, so this is pretty big in our household here. Yes, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl, but my favorite bet is each team to kick one field goal in the first half. That's it. That's plus 155. That's all you need. Look, even Teddy is on board. Even Teddy knows the Philadelphia Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. 1+ field goal each first half, plus 155.
What's up, everybody? Off to get some delicious breakfast, but before I eat, I want to tell you, best bet of the Super Bowl, A.J. Brown. First touchdown, you can find it 10-1 out there in the market. Of course, enjoy the game, have fun. Talk to you guys soon.
I heard you were looking for some long shot Super Bowl props. If the Chiefs are playing in any game, you know what name's coming out of my mouth. The same one you've been hearing all of 2023. The same guy who's been putting money in your pockets all 2023. Isaiah Pacheco, the human credit card payment. We've been taking those rushing props. We've been taking those receiving props. I'm going to combine them. Go rushing and receiving and bumping it all the way up. Don't you know? Bump it up. Isaiah Pacheco, 125 plus yards. That's going to get you plus 800. And if you're looking for a nice way to go into the offseason, that's a pretty good way. If you ask me, you'll be sitting in the sun with me after the Super Bowl. Isaiah Pacheco, over 125 plus rushing and receiving.
Oh, hey, don't tell anybody you saw me reading this. This is the copy to this weekend's script to the Super Bowl. So I have all the information. I already know what happens in the game. I have the script copy right here. Only sent it out to a very, very select amount of content creators. I happen to be one of them. So I've got a bet for you. Kadarius Toney plus 420 anytime touchdown score. It's in the script. Go ahead.
I got a big dog, and this big dog's got to eat. So I got to make some money here on the Super Bowl with my best bet, Patrick Mahomes to throw 2 or more interceptions. You can find that plus 450 and higher across the entire industry. 25 interceptions, 12 this season for Patrick Mahomes in the regular season. You have 17 interceptions for the Eagles throughout this season. Slay, Bradbury, just a ridiculous secondary. Fire that one up, and good luck.
If you're not betting the long shot to win Super Bowl MVP this year, what are you doing? Don't even bother turning the TV on, okay? Sure, in all likelihood, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts. But there's an absolute dog on the defensive line that's going to wreak havoc on this Kansas City offense all game long. We're talking about someone that finished second in sacks this season, first in forced fumbles, first in fumble recoveries, has 3.5 sacks in the postseason through only 2 games. Trying to block this dude is like standing in between a crackhead and his connect after he spent all day trying to get his money up. It's just not going to happen. So guess what? If Jalen Hurts is mediocre and the Eagles still win this game and they continue to run a committee in the backfield, it's going to be Hassan Reddick at 35-1 taking home the MVP. And Patrick Mahomes is going to be having nightmares about number 7 for years to come.
is time for another MMA Live Before Lock show Saturday, and we've got a really good fight card this week. And last week, the card on paper was kind of trash. Actually, more than kind of trash. It was absolute dog shit. But I've been on a heater for MMA. I ended up winning the $3 on DraftKings last week. A couple weeks before that, for the pay-per-view event, there was Glover Teixeira against Jamal Hill. I ended up winning a couple of the Rainmakers contests and had over 10K profits on that slate. So I'm running hot right now. I'm feeling good coming into today, Josh. And it's a card that I've been looking forward to this for a really long time. Pound for pound, #1 ranking on the line. Islam Makhachev against Alexander Volkanovski. Josh, how are you doing? And how are you looking forward to this card?
I am doing well. I'm looking forward to this card a lot more than last week. I had to do a lot of deep diving on some of these guys. Like, there wasn't much tape. There's a couple guys on this card there isn't much tape on, but that's all right. Like, I am very interested in this main event, Islam Makhachev against Volkanovski. Like, the disrespect Volkanovski's way this week is just crazy. Like, maybe Makhachev or however you pronounce it. I'm sure I'm, messing up a syllable here and there. That's my thing. Maybe he does slice through him like butter, but like, people are treating Volkanovski like he's Darren Elkins this week or something. And it's just crazy. He's on a 22 fight winning streak. He's really a lightweight that somehow makes featherweight. Like, he's huge for the featherweight division. He didn't look undersized here. He's a short king. He's 5'6", but he didn't look undersized compared to Makhachev. Maybe he loses. Maybe he gets dominated, but like, people are just treating it like it's a foregone conclusion. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion.
I mean, I shouldn't say foregone conclusion. So, like, if it was a foregone conclusion, they wouldn't even fight, right? They would just set the betting odds. They'd be like, "Hey, look, here's a title defense for Islam Makhachev." So I'm not going to say it's a foregone conclusion. Now, with that said, and we can just start right away by talking about the main event. As you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to PrizePicks, who is sponsoring the show. I'll be giving out some more PrizePicks picks as we go along. We'll find some value we like over there. But I think this is a really good matchup for Islam. I think everything's a good matchup for Islam. Like, we were talking about this in the Discord channel before. And realistically, if you look at the lightweight division, who would you even say in the top 10 you'd give a realistic chance to beat him? Because he's right around a -400 favorite today. I honestly don't think there's anybody you could match him up against within reason that you would not make him like a -400 favorite or larger against.
Yeah, I was going through the list, like Rafael Fiziev, maybe, but like, we've never really seen him test it off his back. Hanato Moicano, maybe, because he has the jiu-jitsu, but he got absolutely wrestle-fucked by Rafael dos Santos. That was on short notice, though. So, like, yeah, if Makhachev can keep making 155.
What'd you call him?
I don't know.
My cock something? That was you got to that was where you got to. So I mean, you're talking about the Volk disrespect, but here you are. You're like Dana White forgetting Islam's name.
Makhachev, if he can keep making 155, which may be a struggle, he's monstrous for 155. I just think he keeps cleaning it out, and maybe he's talked about moving up to 170. The PR machine is spinning there. I think his coaches know realistically that he's not going to be able to make 155 forever and eventually move up. But yeah, there's no matchup that really is going to be like, oh yeah, he's only going to be a -160 here.
So to me, when we were talking about this in Discord, I had said that I thought Fiziev has the most realistic chance to win. And that doesn't even mean that I would make the line anywhat close between them. It's more just who has the best puncher's chance to knock out Islam Makhachev. And I would just land on Fiziev because he has really good takedown defense and a lot of power. Now, does that matter for today?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter at all for today. It doesn't mean shit. It was just kind of an interesting talking point. But here's why I favor Islam so heavily in this match and why I think the line is, about accurate. Am I betting him at a -400 favorite? No, absolutely not. But I'm not going to bet Volk on the other side either. And, it's not that often that Sean V is in chat with really strong takes. Right? This doesn't happen all that often around these parts on the YouTube channel, but he does with this one, which is Ortega took down Volk twice, and he's a 22% takedown accuracy. And if you look at Volkanovski's career, as much as overall, the metrics imply that he has a pretty sturdy 73% takedown defense, he generally has not fought great wrestlers. And even people who wrestle remotely, he's kind of gotten taken down by them fairly consistently. So Brian Ortega took him down twice. Then we saw the fights against Holloway. All right, Holloway didn't take him down, but that's not something we ever anticipated. Chad Mendes took him down 3 times in one round. Darren Elkins took him down. Shane Young took him down. So in general, more often than not in a lot of his fights, when we've seen somebody with any semblance of wrestling, Volk has gotten taken down by those guys, and he has not fought anybody nearly the level of wrestler and grappler as Islam. The closest is Chad Mendes, and Mendes took him down 3 times in the first round. So ultimately, that's what I think is going to happen most likely here. I think we're going to see Islam take down Volk a whole bunch of times. And the other thing, too, is Volk's a good scrambler. He's good at getting back to his feet. I don't expect that to deter Islam in any way. I think that he's going to be fine with the mat returns, staying on the wrestling. If anything, Volk's ability to get back to his feet is going to be a positive to the DFS score of Islam. So he's going to be my most rostered fighter today.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you 100%, especially not like Volkanovski not playing off his back. He's going to scramble up. I think that helps Islam a lot here. And I think, I see a lot of people saying he's going to win inside the distance. And I don't know that. Who do you, in your opinion, who's a better submission grappler, Brian Ortega or Islam Makhachev?
For MMA purposes or for jiu-jitsu? For MMA purposes, Islam.
Yeah. I just think like he's going to have a real tough time submitting Volkanovski. Like that guillotine choke Ortega had on him, like that was like a 1 in 100. Like everyone taps there or everyone goes to sleep there. Maybe he does get a late submission. I just think, Volkanovski is so tough that he's going to keep working his way back up. Like Makhachev, you don't really see him chain wrestle too often, but it wouldn't shock me to see 8 to 10 takedowns over 5 rounds in this fight.
Yeah. And by the way, what is his, I told earlier in the week, PrizePicks is the sponsor today. If you guys haven't signed up at PrizePicks yet, use our link. It's going to get you up to $100 bonus on your first deposit, and you get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. So here are some of the things you get access to when you sign up for Stokastic Plus. So not just the MMA today, because I know that's what you guys are here for. I assume that's what most of you are interested in. The Super Bowl's tomorrow. We've got lots of tools for the Super Bowl. We've got our lineup generator, which is a lot of cool features that you could use to set a game script for the Super Bowl to build lineups with it, but also NBA projections, player projections, ownership projections. If you guys sign up at PrizePicks, using the link we have below, you're going to get all of that for 1 month in addition to a $100 deposit bonus. And pulling this up right now, the over-under for takedowns for Islam is 3.0. I like the over on that. I know it seems like a fairly high line. It's the highest of anybody on the slate. I still like the over on 3.
Yeah, I like the over, assuming like he doesn't find a ridiculous submission early. He's gonna. I would bet on 5 or more over 5 rounds. If you told me that it's going to go at least 20 minutes, I would take over 5. So yeah, over 3 for sure.
Yeah, that's what I feel pretty good about. And like I said, Chad Mendes got 3 in the first round against Volk. I think in a 5-round fight, fairly likely that I think we see a whole bunch of takedowns from Islam. And then on the other side, how interested are you going to be in Volk in tournaments? Because he is so cheap that realistically, if he wins this fight, no matter what he ends up doing, he's going to put up a score that's going to win a GPP. How live do you think he is in this matchup, and how willing are you to roster him in tournaments?
If you look at, Makhachev's odds here is like minus 400, which is what, like 75 to 80% of the time he wins there. That means if they fought, 10 times, Volkanovski's winning twice. Let's be real here. This is the best striker Islam has ever faced. He's fought Drew Dober, but Drew Dober's a liability on the mat. Subbed him in the first. He fought his teammate. He got subbed him in the first. What was his name? Just my mind is Dan Hooker subbed him in the first, but like Volkanovski is an excellent round winner. Like that's the best thing about him. He knows how to win rounds. The problem is if he can't stop the takedowns, he has to rely on his power, and he doesn't have, lights out, knockout, one punch power. So if he does get that freak knockout, it could be late and he doesn't score well, but at his price, if he does pull off the upside here, he's gonna be optimal unless someone like Shainis or Randy Brown put up an early finish. You know what I mean? At 6,700, even if he got like 78 points in like a 4th round fluke knockout, that's going to be enough to be optimal. Because I would assume at least half the field's going to be on Islam here. And
the other thing too, and by the way, I think Volk's going to be very popular. If we look at, I'll pull up our latest ownership projections. So I think we had a rerun of that this afternoon. But yeah, if Volk wins, the other thing too is, as you and I were mentioning briefly before the show, the underdogs kind of suck this week. Like there are not I don't have that many guys that I feel all that great about. Last weekend we were talking about the card that was full of the debuting fighters. So many of them were unknowns. You can make a case for somebody like, all right, Fugit is a massive underdog, but we know that he is wrestling, and there's so many unknowns that I think you can make a case on a slate like this. There aren't that many underdogs I like. I don't like Volkanovski either, but if he wins, I think he's going to be in the optimal lineup. So I think my final exposure is probably going to be something around like 85% Islam to 15% Volk. Like that's probably the split I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I mean, like Volkanovski is the number one pound for pound fighter right now. You know what I mean? It just feels weird just being like, nah. But it is one of the worst matchups he's ever had. So if he does win by fluke knockout and even scores 80, he's going to flip the GPPs upside down. But I think Makhachev, even though he's 9,500 with Volk scrambling up and he lands 6, 7, 8 takedowns, I think you can see a score, even in a decision of close to 120 plus. You know what I mean? So.
Ownership projections, by the way. Islam currently projected by us to be the most popular fighter on the slate, projected for 42.5% ownership. And then on the other side, we have Volk projected for 24% ownership. That is on DraftKings. For FanDuel purposes, we have a total of 43% ownership going to Islam. And then Volk on the other side is projected for 18% ownership. And then obviously pricing is a little bit different on FanDuel as well. So you're not getting quite the same discount on Volk that you do on DraftKings. But main event, I don't really know how much to add to this other than is it a fight you're going to have in 100% of your lineups, the majority of your lineups? Like how high of a priority is it for you to target?
So I'm making 20. Like if I make 20, I think maybe I'll fade it in 1 or 2. But like it's just really hard to get away from it. Because if you're going into that last fight and say you have like a 103-point lead with like a ton of Islam behind you, man, that's going to be a sweat. So I mean, maybe there's a mid-range build that just absolutely just finishes the card and they put up like 700 points, but you're going to need an underdog to win somewhere. So, I mean, these underdogs aren't great. So, yeah, putting in Islam here and hoping that Volkanovski can scramble up a bunch and Islam gets 5+ takedowns, bunch of control. You hope he hits optimal.
Yeah, and by the way, pretty interesting question here from Ryan Rennebaum in YouTube chat. And I think this actually this is going to transition us really well to our next fight because we've got 2 title fights on the card, 2 5-round fights. Main event we just talked about, the co-main, Yair Rodrigues versus Josh Emmett. The winner becomes the interim featherweight champion and earns the right to lose to Alex Volkanovski in their last fight. So Ryan has asked us, of the 2 5-round fights, which one is more likely to be optimal? My opinion is Volk and Islam, but do you feel differently?
I think it's really close. It depends, right? If you think Yair Rodrigues is going to win, maybe that side will be more optimal. But Josh Emmett is more reliable. Like he relies on big moments, so he might get a knockout a bit later and score 80. But like, Islam's going to be wrestling. He's going to rack up the control time. He's going to have the ground and pound, possible submissions. It's like, yeah, Yair is going to have the volume. Like he can get his lights shut out at any point, and Emmett might not score great. So yeah, I think whoever wins in the Islam Volkanovski fight should score decent, unless it's like a fluke, Volkanovski knockout late. So I think slight edge to the main event, but I don't discredit the co-main event. I think it's a good fight to target as well.
It's a good one to target. The reason I think the main event is more likely to be optimal, Josh Emmett's been in some fairly shitty fights as of late, and he's not a high output guy. And part of it too is that he is also so dangerous with his power that a lot of people, like his last fight against Calvin Kattar, that's a fight, 5-round decision. Emmett wins. It goes 5 rounds. He finished with 72 DraftKings points in the win. And part of it too is Calvin Kattar's typically a guy who's super high output. And he just totally changed his game to be more reserved against the power of Josh Emmett. Like he wasn't stepping on the gas in the same way that he had in some of his previous fights. And that's why I also think that we've seen some Josh Emmett fights play out like that. So here's his last 2 wins. He scored 72 and 70 DraftKings points. So, I mean, you could make a case. And once again, like I said, the last one was a 5-round win. So I think that there's a definite scenario where the winner of Yair and Emmett is not optimal. I mean, that could happen with any fight, but I feel way more confident that Islam and Volk is going to be optimal as relative to the other one. But with that said, it's still a good fight to target. I lean very strongly towards Yair Rodrigues for a number of reasons. Emmett is 38 at featherweight. And then also, how much do you buy into the rumors about his injuries?
It's just hard because MMA reporting is just awful. You know what I mean? Like you hear these whispers and all that stuff, but like speaking of massive guys, how does that guy make 145 pounds? He's taking his Flintstone vitamins. I want his doctor, but like he has a he comes from a wrestling background and he has a gross wrestling advantage here, but like he's not going to use it. And if he is injured, he's going to have to just sit back and, wing those massive rights that he, shuts people the lights out with. Yair moves for 25 minutes. You saw that in the Korean Zombie fight. Even though he was getting his ass kicked for 24 minutes and 30 seconds, he was dancing, he was moving, he was coming forward, always on his bike. I just think, with the movement, Yair's output, everything, Emmett, he's just so reliant on big moments. Yair Rodrigues is such a better round winner. It's just like if this goes to decision, it's almost like the Calvin Kattar fight was weird. I think Kattar, you can argue Kattar won that decision, but like with Yair's kicking output, right? He just kicks a bunch at range. It's just better optics. If this goes to decision, it's just hard to believe that Emmett's going to win it.
Yeah. So, and by the way, to what you just said, the part about Yair being the better minutes winner, all of the numbers indicate that, and that's also why my favorite bet of this card, from a sportsbook perspective, is earlier in the week I bet Yair Rodrigues minus 200 decision only. So if you guys know how the decision only props work, and there's also the finish only market, it basically means if the fight goes to the scorecards, and this fighter wins, the bet wins. If the fight finishes inside the distance, regardless of which fighter wins inside the distance, the bet gets voided. I just do not see a path where this goes to the judges' scorecards and Emmett wins. So to me, minus 200 was actually, it seems wide. It's a pretty ridiculous price, in my opinion, on Yair to win in the decision only market.
Yeah. Like it would just be unfair. Like for Emmett to win, it's going to have to be inside the distance unless like he almost knocks him out and Yair is just, concussed like for 4 rounds, just dancing around. But that would mean it would be like one of the worst fights of all time. So yeah, if it gets to the judges' scorecards, it's hard to fathom Emmett winning decision.
And then also, Mike, I'm about to send you something to put up on the screen because I think I have an answer for you. You asked, how is it that Josh Emmett is able to make 145 pounds? Magic. The reason is because I think he's actually Voldemort. If you look at you can't tell me it's not the same dude. That is Voldemort. Mike, can you put that picture I just send you up on the screen if that went through to you? Because they look identical. All right, here it's about to come up. Big anticipation here. Tell me that's not Voldemort. I know he grew a nose so he could breathe out of it. That's Voldemort though. That's
Oh yeah. Like that is worse than when Conor McGregor would make 145. Just skeletons. He's just skin and bones.
He makes it with wizardry. Dark magic, wizardry. It's time to put an end to that nonsense.
EPO, all the good stuff.
And Yair Rodrigues, I really do heavily favor him in this matchup. Once again, going through some of the metrics on this fight, Yair Rodrigues lands at a higher output, 4.67 significant strikes per minute for him to 4.28 for Josh Emmett. And then in terms of the striking defense, Yair absorbs 4.12 to 4.29 for Josh Emmett. And then Josh Emmett does have a wrestling background. He never uses it. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe it's because he's afraid of the cardio dump. Maybe it's also because he's 38 years old and he's had a lot of injuries that mount. So the other thing too about all the injury stuff is he has said the reason he doesn't take more fights is because of his injuries. Is that he says that if he fought more than once or so per year, he doesn't think his body could withhold it. Another thing that indicates he's probably not 100% healthy to me, but if we're not going to see any takedowns really from Josh Emmett here, I think Yair Rodrigues has higher output, higher strikes land per minute, absorbs less damage per minute, and then also I think he has better cardio than Emmett. The other thing too is Yair is to me at least appears to be getting better each time he fights. So if you look at his last few fights, he looked fairly decent in the win over Jeremy Stevens. He did get a little bit tired towards the third round of that, but the follow-up fight against Max Holloway, he looked incredible. And I know he lost to Holloway, but it was a relatively close fight. So, that's to me somewhat of a win and a loss. And then the last fight against Brian Ortega, he looked fairly good in the first round against Ortega, shoulder injury for him. So what could we really we can't put too much stock into that, but either way, I like Yair Rodrigues. He's my preferred option for DraftKings purposes in this fight, but I give Emmett much more of a live chance to win than I give Volkanovski to in the main event.
Oh yeah. And with Yair, it's hard to look good against Max Holloway. And he did it, at least early. Max, when you get into those later rounds with Max, he's just nuts. But yeah, if Emmett could win at any point with an overhand right, you know what I mean? It's just, if it's not early, he's not going to score great. He is only 7,700, which is nice. If he does get like a third or fourth round KO, it's just, I have way more faith that I can't speak today. Yair Rodrigues, with his volume, can get over 100 points. It's a tough path for Emmett outside of like a first or second round knockout to get close to 100 points.
In the loss to Max Holloway, this was a loss. He scored 81 fantasy points to Yair Rodrigues in a loss to Max Holloway. That is more fantasy points than Josh Emmett scored in either of his last 2 wins. So, I mean, that just kind of goes to show the difference there could potentially be in the output here. If these guys are at range too, the kicks of Yair Rodrigues, I think he chews up Emmett, especially, don't forget too, Emmett, what was it, 3 fights ago, he tore his ACL in the fight. Like, he got him with a not great knee that Yair Rodrigues has as a target to hit. So that's going to be my preferred target here is Yair Rodrigues in a pretty significant way over Josh Emmett. Now, we'll move down to the rest of the fights on the card, and then some of these other ones, obviously we don't have to spend quite as much time as we did on the main event, but Jack Della Maddalena, one of the favorite prospects for a lot of the MMA community, taking on Randy Brown. And Jack Della Maddalena, it's kind of annoying because I'm looking to fade him at some point. This is not the matchup, though. I think that he has tremendous power. Randy Brown does not really take damage all that well. So I think Randy Brown, the line might be a little bit too wide. If Randy Brown does happen to get his wrestling going, I think he should have a pretty big advantage there. I have big concerns about Jack Della Maddalena in terms of his takedown defense and his grappling game. I just don't think Randy Brown is the guy to exploit this. So I think this is a matchup where the most likely outcome is Jack Della Maddalena finishes him sometime probably fairly early, especially with the pressure that he puts on with the striking the early going.
Yeah, the second Maddalena faces a competent grappler, I wouldn't exactly call Randy Brown a competent grappler. He has good submissions. His wrestling isn't very good. Like, I'm going to look to fade him. Someone who can actually chain takedowns together. Like, he got taken down by Angelusa on the Dana White Contender Series and got held down for over half the round. So, will Randy Brown land takedowns here? I doubt it. He lands under 0.7 takedowns per 15 minutes. He lands 33% of the takedowns he attempts. You know what I mean? He's just big and gangly, which is kind of hard to, take down a smaller guy at your weight class. So this is probably just going to be a striking battle, and that has to favor Jack Della Maddalena here. He pressures. He has more power. I wouldn't be surprised to see him finish Randy Brown. Now, if, somehow this fight hits the mat, Randy Brown is live, and we've talked about it. The dogs aren't great. So Randy Brown at 7K, he does have a sneaky, maybe he lands a takedown and can find his submission, but, that's not a realistic path. It's possible. So, like, you have to consider, like, of the guys 7K or lower, like, he's probably my favorite between, Elvis, Oliveira, Brenner, whatever his name is, Volkanovski, Don Shainis, who has a path to victory as well, or Randy Brown. If you're dumpster diving to fit in these expensive guys, I don't mind taking a shot on Randy Brown. I just feel like, he has a very low floor, and the most probable path to victory here is Maddalena is going to finish him.
And I will say one thing, though. There are so many fighters on the high end that I like that I'm going to be underweight to the field on Jack Della Maddalena. He is so popular. We've got him projected for actual comparable ownership to Islam. And I think that's going to be something that a lot of people have to make as a decision point is, all right, if I can only spend up for one of these guys in the 9K price range, do I get to Maddalena or do I play Islam? Well, Maddalena at 38% ownership, I'd rather play Islam at 42%. So that's going to be my lean if I'm paying up. Islam's going to be my guy. Maddalena is also really popular, and you just can't play all of these guys in every lineup because of salary constraints, obviously. Now, Rainmakers, I can, but for DFS purposes here, I can't. So I'm going to be underweight to the field on Jack Della Maddalena, and I'm not going to be comfortable with it. I'm going to be shitting my pants for the first minute of the fight. I just don't want him to get the first minute finish bonus.
That's the worst. The arbitrary 25-point bonus for just absolutely trucking your opponent. Hopefully they just kind of feel each other out for the first, 60 seconds, then they can go to work. But yeah, I think I'm going to be underweight to him as well, just because, like you mentioned, if they're at least comparable in ownership, It just feels better clicking in Islam's name.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well now. Speaking of fights to be underweight too, the only thing that is going to be underweight about the Parker Porter Justin Tafa fight is going to be my exposure to it. It's not going to be the two gentlemen in the octagon. Justin Tafa, the only heavyweight in the history of UFC or the first heavyweight in the history of the UFC to miss the heavyweight limit. That is not exactly a great place in the history book, but that's where he's at. And then he's got Parker Porter, who just inappropriately named Parker Porter. And this is one of my least favorite fights on the card. I'm not looking forward to watching it. From a DFS perspective, I don't think it's great. If I have to play one side, it's going to be Parker Porter just because he's cheap and there are very few fighters sub 8K that I have any bit of confidence in. And if Parker Porter does win, I think he could score decently on DraftKings. I do think he's going to have a wrestling advantage. I hope he doesn't get hurt early. He's also extremely untrustworthy. I don't really want to play Justin Tafa at $8,400. I don't really want to play Parker Porter at $7,800 either, but he's my preferred side for DraftKings. Are you going to take shots at him as a value play, or do you have a different feel on Justin Tafa than I do?
Parker Porter is my preferred side here, just if the fight gets past the first 5 minutes. You know, I mean, Tafa can shut the lights off here. Will he? I don't know. He knocked out Juan Adams pretty quickly, although he got his lights shut off in Australia by Jorgen de Castro. That was a wicked knockout. Then he lost a couple decisions to Jared Vanderaa and Carlos Felipe. That never looks good on your resume. And then he beat, Harry Hunsucker. Sweet. Like, any heavyweight can beat Harry Hunsucker, really. And then you look at Parker Porter in the UFC, he's 3-1. He got knocked out by Chris Daukaus, who I think is much better than Justin Tafa. Still not great, but better than Justin Tafa. Then he went on a 3, fight winning streak by decision. This is the thing, though, right? He beat Chase Sherman by decision, but he landed 150 significant strikes. He landed the takedown. He beat Josh Parisian by decision, landed 126 significant strikes and two takedowns. He landed a couple takedowns against Alan Baudot. You know what I mean? So, like, he has a wrestling side here. He lands 6.5 significant strikes per minute. If he survives those massive power shots in the first 5 minutes, I think his volume is going to take over here. He got wiped out by Jailton Almeida. I think he got, didn't even score a point there. But, like, you can't really blame him for that loss. Almeida is just an absolute monster. I think, he can land, 70, 80, 90, 100 significant strikes in a decision victory, maybe land a takedown or two, score 75 to 85 DraftKings points. For his price, it's fine. You just have to worry, the early minutes could be a bit dicey here. Neither of these guys are trustworthy.
No, it's not a great fight to target. There's a lot of fights on this card where, really high inside the distance finish props. And the other thing too is, like, Tafa's fairly expensive relative to his inside the distance line as well. Like I said, $8,400 on DK. Here are the most recent lines for this piece of shit fight that's on which this is what annoys me about heavyweights as well. Just because they're heavyweights, like, oh, cool, you're fat, you get on the main event. Like, there's no other reason that this fight is on the main event other than that what they weigh. No other reason.
Yeah, they're just big boys, and they hope one of them just gets sent to the first row.
So Justin Tafa, inside the distance, anywhere from plus 150 to plus 160. Just not great for somebody in that price range, especially because he doesn't have another path, right? There isn't a way that he gets a decision win where he scores super well. He needs an early finish. In fact, he doesn't even need, like, a third round finish wouldn't get it done. Like, he needs an early finish in order to be on the optimal lineup at his price point. It's just not all that likely. So I'll be passing on Tafa, and I feel pretty good about not getting to him. And then once again, just hoping that there's going to be no early finish, and Parker Porter, my slightly preferred option of a fight that I don't really like all that much. The next fight, though, is one that I definitely think is a great one for DFS. And I'm looking forward to it in real life as well, because the fight we have to kick off the pay-per-view card, Jimmy Crute against Alonzo Menefield. Here's how I see this fight going. Jimmy Crute is going to take Alonzo Menefield down and sub him fairly easily, or he's not, and Alonzo Menefield is going to send him to an early grave on the feet. And Alonzo Menefield hits fucking hard. And I don't really see this fight going any other way other than, maybe it gets past a couple of rounds. They're both fairly tired, and it's like inactivity in the third round. What I think is most likely here, though, is we are seeing a one-sided fight where whoever wins ends up looking like a minus 500 favorite. And also, if you look at the betting odds right now, Jimmy Crute the favorite, anywhere from like minus 165 to minus 180. but also under 1.5 rounds in this fight, minus 155. This is a very high priority fight to target on DraftKings just because of the pricing. I'm going to lead towards Menefield. There are very few underdogs I like. I'm going to be playing him a little bit heavier just because of, I think that he's the most upside of any fighter who's priced below 8K. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Realistic upside. Because like if Volk wins, he would score really well. But the implied odds of Menefield winning is significantly better than what we're getting out of Volk.
Oh yeah, if Menefield wins, he's most likely going to be optimal. Just because Jimmy Crute is the way more talented fighter here. But Jimmy Crute is a moron. His fight IQ is non-existent. He strikes with the strikers. He grapples with the grapplers. He has a gross grappling edge here. He's probably going to stand and bang. You know what I mean? Like, if he does that, he's going to get decapitated. Another thing to keep in mind in this fight, he just had reconstructive knee surgery. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, he got hurt badly. If Jimmy Crute chooses to wrestle here, he's going to win. Like, Menefield off his back, nothing to be scared of. He defends takedowns at 85%, but, like, who has he really fought that has taken him down? William Knight took him down. Devin Clark was able to get him down. Daniel Jolly on Dana White Contender Series got him down. If Jimmy Crute chooses to wrestle here, he's going to get him down. He's going to submit him. The problem with Jimmy Crute, like I just mentioned, he chose to wrestle with Misha Serkinov, whose only path to victory is submission grappling. Jimmy Crute got Peruvian necktied. I don't know why more fighters go for that submission. It's always there in the front headlock series, but that's neither here nor there. Then he subbed, Michael Lord Olenjachuk, which was nice. He knocked out Modestas Bukauskas, who's on this card, but then he chose to stand with Anthony Smith and got knocked out. Then he got knocked out by Jamal Hill, who's now the champ. He just needs to wrestle here. If he wrestles, he wins. If he chooses to strike, there is a good chance he's going to get knocked out by Menefield, because Menefield is wildly dangerous, especially in the first round. Knocked out Misha Serkinov, knocked out Askar Mazarov, who was a fraud. But, this is a very binary fight, but one that's going to finish early, or should finish early.
Yeah, and a very important question, too, by Chad Counts in the YouTube chat, because he said, can you quantify fucking hard for me? And then he said, on a scale of Cialis to Viagra. I mean, this is like calling the emergency hotline for the 4 hours issue hard. Like, that's how hard Alonzo Menefield hits. And the dude also is built like a linebacker. I mean, he's gigantic. And then I think there's a pretty important point also that Sean V brings up in the chat, because I'm going to parlay this into another talking point. He said, Crute was impressive against Anthony Smith, taking him down 3 times on one leg ish. Here's the issue with that. He was able to get Anthony Smith down that easily on one leg, but because he's an idiot, he never shot takedowns until he was not able to stand anymore. He comes into fights with horrific game plans.
Oh,
this is not a guy to mess around with on the feet in Alonzo Menefield. So, once again, just to recap this, very high priority fight to target. We're looking at like minus 160 odds to finish inside 1.5 rounds. Alonzo Menefield is either going to hurt Jimmy Crute on the feet and finish him early, in my opinion, or Jimmy Crute's going to look for takedowns, is going to take him down, and is going to submit Alonzo Menefield, because Menefield is nothing off his back. This is a great fight for DraftKings. Don't touch it in cash games. Cash games, this thing is a coin flip. This could go either way. Tournaments, though, I'm going to be massively high on both sides of this fight. Do you have a preferred side that you're going to be going after in GPPs?
It depends on your build, right? Because if you need an underdog, you just hope, and you play Menefield, you hope Crute comes in with a bad game plan. I mean, his fight IQ is like a deer in the headlights. Like, if you're from New Jersey and there's tons of deer,
yeah,
they just sit there looking at you like an idiot. But, like, the better fighter based on skill set is Jimmy Crute. It's just hard to rely on a fighter using his path the least resistance. That being said, I think I am going to be heavier on Crute here, just because, like, he has a gross edge on the mat. If he gets it there once, the fight could just be done within 30 seconds. So I'm going to be higher on Crute, but there is a lot of merit to going Menefield here, just because, Crute loves to use his hands where this is danger time if he decides to stand and bang with Menefield.
And by the way, I never really thought about it. We just saw Mike had a still shot of Menefield's knockout against Misha Serkinov. I'm fairly sure it was. Those look like murder scenes when they're still shots because he's standing over. Can you put that picture back up on the screen real quick, Mike? If not, it's okay. But here it is. Yeah, I mean, look at it. It looks like he's just killed somebody if you look at it as a still shot where he's standing over him like that. But that is what's going to happen to Jimmy Crute if he attempts to try to stand with Alonzo Menefield. So to me, Menefield is going to be my preferred play on DraftKings just because of the price point, and I do not trust the fight IQ of Jimmy Crute, and I think every time he gets knocked out, he gets a little bit stupider. The next fight here is Tyson Pedro against Modestas Bukauskas, and Pedro, all of his fights is pretty much early finish or bust, and he's another guy who he's got a couple of things going for him. Number one, the UFC loves him. For whatever reason, they only give him the easiest matchups in the world, and he still fails in a decent amount of them. So Tyson Pedro has another incredibly easy matchup against Modestas Bukauskas. It's hard to totally write him off, but it's hard for me to really trust Tyson Pedro with my money because here are his 4 most recent fights. All right, cool. He knocked out Harry Hunsucker early. You know what knocks out Harry Hunsucker early? Literally everybody. Like, Hunsucker is a jobber. He gets brought into the UFC just to lose to prospects who the UFC wants to put over. So that's what he was there to do. Same thing happened to Mike Villanueva in the fight before. Tyson Pedro finishes him in the first round. But the other fights that we saw recently, and by the way, recently, I just mean the fights that he fought most recently, took a long time off after losing to Shogun Hua, who is also incredibly washed up. He should have retired like 10 years ago, and he knocked out Tyson Pedro in the third round. And here's where things get concerning. A fight against Tyson Pedro and Shogun Hua. Shogun was able to take Tyson Pedro down 3 times in that fight. And in a fight that ended in the third round, Pedro only landed 31 significant strikes. Fight before that, he gets submitted by Ovin St. Preux, also in the first round of that fight. So I think that Tyson Pedro is a massive fraud. Unfortunately, though, he also is fighting somebody who just does not belong at this level. So I'm going to be underweight to this fight. And I think, or at least I'm hoping, there's just not that much happens early.
Yeah, the one thing going if you're fading Pedro here is Modestas Bukauskas loves to fight at a slow pace. That being said, the fight that went to the distance with Mikhail Olajashuk, I butchered that name, but there was only, between the two of them, 114 significant strikes landed there. They just kind of, felt it out. Like the one thing with Pedro, if he doesn't get the early finish, he slows down dramatically. Now, Modestas, I don't even know why they brought him back. He has the one win by knockout against Andre Michailidis, but that was such a weird knockout. Like Michailidis was getting back up and they opened the cage door and he fell out.
Yeah.
and the referee thought, he fell over. So he's just like, the fight's over. I think that fight could have continued, but they opened the cage door, wasn't expecting it, out he falls. Then, he got finished by Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute actually, brought it on the feet there. Another idiot. He could have went for takedowns. He didn't. He lost that split decision to Olajashuk. Yeah, he looked okay in that fight. He didn't look great. And then he got knocked out by Khalil Roundtree. But if Pedro doesn't get it done in the first round, I think, Bukauskas can, dance around on the outside, picking his jab, pick his spots, possibly win like a 65, 70-point decision. You know what I mean? It's either going to be Pedro early and he's optimal, or this fight is a total bust, in my opinion.
Which, here's what's really hard about these spots for me, and the way I break down fights. You could only get as many opportunities as strikes you throw to get a finish. And neither one of these guys throw strikes. So this sets up to me on paper, the way I break down fights, to be such a low output fight that I understand it's fairly likely to finish inside the distance based on the betting odds. And I get that Tyson Pedro throughout his career has basically been first round finish or bust, but he lands 2.95 significant strikes per minute. Modestas Bukauskas lands 3.59 significant strikes per minute. There is such a high likelihood this ends up being like the Shogun Hua fight where it's like, hey, we're in the third round. The significant strikes are 31-30 that, in large field tournaments, it's just because of the potential for a finish. It's okay to get some exposure here, but I'm going to be way underweight to the field because there are other favorites I feel so much better about than Tyson Pedro, and he's really expensive. So I'm be looking elsewhere to spend my money by in large part. It's not going to be 100% fade, but I will certainly be underweight to the field on this one.
Yeah, and here's the thing, another thing with Pedro, right? He has a gross edge on the map, but he can't wrestle. He lands under like 0.6 takedowns per 15 minutes, and his takedown accuracy is 25%. If he could get the fight to the mat, he probably finishes it, but like he landed 2 takedowns against Khalil Roundtree back in 2016. That's the last time he's landed a takedown in the UFC. So you can't really rely on that either. You just hope if you are fading, you just hope it's a slow, methodical, dink and dab decision.
Which a lot of once again, the output of these guys suggests that is probably one of the more likely outcomes. So fight that I'll be underweight to the field to. And then the next one, Josh Culibao against Melsik Baghdasarian. This is another fight where I think it's going to be really competitive. And what makes it hard for me to prioritize this one really at all for DraftKings purposes is, number one, this fight is minus 150-ish to go to the decision. It is minus 350 to be over 1.5 rounds. And I also don't have a really strong read on who's going to win the fight. So a lot of times we see some of these mid-range fights become pivotal, but this is one that I don't think the winner is going to score especially well in. And I also don't have a strong read on who I think is going to win the fight, which also makes me not really want to target this one heavily. So if you've built out your lineup and you kind of need this fight as a last man in, sure, that's fine. But another fight that I'm not really all that high on, could you try to convince me otherwise?
Yeah, I just, if I'm going to play this fight, it's probably going to be on the Baghdasarian side, just because he has higher output. He lands 6 significant strikes per minute, which is way better than the 3.06 of Culibao. Culibao has big moments, but like he doesn't capitalize on them. Against Sang-Woo Choi, he had 2 knockdowns and still only won by a split decision. So like he gives it back. He's just not a very good round winner. He has his big moments. He knocked down, Charles Jourdain, couldn't finish the fight, ended up being a majority draw. Then he won a decision against Shailan Nurbinbeke. Me and names just never get along, so that's the best I'm going to do. But like in this fight against Baghdasarian, it's probably just going to be a stand-up affair. Neither have landed a takedown in the UFC, so I'm just going to favor the guy with higher output. Maybe Culibao can hurt him and have his moment, but like he just doesn't capitalize on it. So even if he lands a knockdown here, I just don't see how, outside of a finish, that the guy winning here is going to score 95 to 110 points, which you need for the $8,200 and $8,000 salary guys. They need to put up probably at least 95 points, and I just don't see the path outside of a finish here.
Yeah, we're on the same page then. So I think we see this the same way. Not really a high priority fight. One more thing I want to mention, guys, is that if you want to sign up for any package over at Stokastic right now, 50% off the first one you sign up for. So if you want to sign up for a platinum pass for the next month, use the link below to get 50% off, because that is going to get you projections for all the MMA tonight. It's going to get you the Super Bowl for tomorrow, and then also all of the upcoming NBA slates and NHL as well. So we've got everything covered with our platinum membership, and I think that's what you guys are going to get the best value from, while also looking for some of your MMA projections, because we know that's only something that happens once a week. But we got Josh covering hockey for us. I'm on NBA all the time. NFL Super Bowl is going to be tomorrow. There's a $6 million contest on DraftKings. If you want projections for every single DFS sport out there, sign up for a platinum pass and use the link below to get 50% off when you do sign up. Now let's move on to the next fight, and this one's pretty easy for me. Klidson Rodrigues against Shannon Ross. I very heavily favor Rodrigues in this fight. He also is very likely to finish inside the distance. He missed weight. A lot of people get really concerned about that. Depending how they look when they miss weight, I don't really care all that much. I think the most likely outcome here is Rodrigues finishes Shannon Ross and does it fairly early. We don't have that much information on Shannon Ross, but what is available of him on YouTube, he gets hurt in pretty much all of his fights. So I think we're going to see Rodrigues put him away. Another one who's in my player pool of spend up options. Ross, I'm going to be mostly punting on him as a punt.
Yeah, the reason to play Ross, right, as an underdog is because he just pushes the pace. In his Dana White Contender Series fight, he actually was the favorite against Vincivius Salvador, but he got dropped real quick.
Yeah.
real quick. And he just got up, kept pushing the pace. That fight was nuts. That fight ended before the end of the second round. Ross landed 67 significant strikes after getting dropped 3 times. You know what I mean? And Salvador landed 79 significant strikes with 3 knockdowns. the reason to target this fight is just off pace alone. So like, I think Rodrigues, if Shannon Ross gets in his face, Rodrigues is going to have a higher output. Ross has no defensive responsibility at all. He is hittable however you want to hit him. He's just there to get hit. And I think Rodrigues can score very well here. Now, he is kind of in no man's land on DraftKings at 8,800. I believe he's 8,800. Yeah. He's, below Pedro, but then you have the Mullarkey, Crute, Yair, Rodrigues, 3 guys right below him. So just based off like lineup construction, if you are putting Islam into your lineup, it's hard to get in Rodrigues too, and another one of Mullarkey, Crute, Rodrigues without really dumpster diving. So like, you look at his projected ownership here, it is 32%, which seems a bit high, but he's coming in lower than Mullarkey. He's coming in lower than Rodrigues, and I think he has a legitimate path to putting up big score just because Ross just comes forward and gets hit. That's like all he does. So good chance Rodrigues finishes here. Even if it isn't early, I think he scores well. If it's a second round, there's going to be a ton of volume. So yeah, I do really like Kletzen Rodrigues here.
Yeah, we've got Mike who's doing betting content for us right now in the YouTube chat, and he's talking about the Dana White's Contender Series fight, which you also mentioned there, Josh. But yeah, Shannon Ross in the Contender Series only made it to the second round against Vinicius Salvador. In that fight, absorbed 79 significant strikes and was knocked down 3 times. I think Rodrigues is much more dangerous and better striker than Salvador. So strong play, in my opinion, in Kletzen Rodrigues. Really like getting to him. Next fight is another pretty good one to target. Jamie Mullarkey against Francisco Prado. And at first glance, I was kind of surprised the line wasn't wider for this matchup. But Prado, I think it's kind of hard to make him too big of an underdog based on some of the unknowns we have about him after I watched some video on him, just because he hits so hard and he's so explosive in the early going of his fights. You could only make him so big of an underdog because he's so dangerous in the first couple of minutes that he's live to knock anybody out. So I think he's a live underdog in this spot. Mullarkey, if he's able to survive the first few minutes, I expect he's going to take over, get his pressure going, probably honestly melts Prado with his wrestling, grappling, pace, and pressure. So whoever wins this fight, I think this is another one that should score really well. Mullarkey's obviously my pick. He's going to be on my preferred side. He wins more often than not. But Prado's a live underdog, and I don't really think the field is going to be getting to him. I think he's a good contrarian tournament option.
Yeah, so there isn't much on Prado other than, he's 20 years old. He's from Argentina. He's fought awful competition. And all the fights that are available, he's winning in the first round, which doesn't tell you much. He's never, really fought through adversity, and Mullarkey's going to put him through some adversity here. Mullarkey is hittable, though, so there is going to be some dangerous moments in that first round. Now, you hope Mullarkey, with his big old punchable head, comes in with a game plan to wrestle here, because in his first few fights in the UFC, his first one against Brad Riddell, which he got whooped, but he did attempt 15 takedowns in that fight. Against Fares Zaim, he attempted 11 takedowns in that fight. Then you start looking at his last few fights against Jalen Turner, where he lost in the second round. He only attempted 3. And then in his last fight against Michael Johnson, who is a massive liability on the mat, he only attempted 2, which is a bit concerning for me, considering he has a very big edge in wrestling in this fight. So I'm hoping he comes in with a more wrestling-heavy game plan, maybe even work him up against Prado up against the cage in the first round to get him tired. But he needs to wrestle here. Otherwise, in that first round especially, it could get pretty ugly. But if it gets into the second round, we've never seen Prado face adversity. He's 20 years old. He's undefeated. Sometimes these undefeated, kids don't really go through adversity too well. Mullarkey's the better fighter. I think he can grind him out on the mat. I just hope that he chooses to do that.
Yeah. Like I said, this is one where I think the winner's going to score well. This is another one of those fights where kind of like the Menefield Crute, not quite the same upside, but still one that we definitely want to get exposure to. And moving on. By the way, Mike, are you cool if I go a few minutes long? Does it matter? All right, cool. Because I know there's nothing after us, and we've got 4 fights to get through. Some of these are going to be, fairly quick, but still, we'll stick around for a couple minutes to make sure we get through every fight. The next one, Jack Jenkins, Don Shainis. I have no interest in Shainis as an underdog at all in this fight. I think Jenkins should have all the advantages, and I'm kind of interested to see how much he went to his wrestling in his Contender Series fight. We actually saw him land 4 takedowns in the fight against Linares. So That does unlock a little bit of extra upside for Jack Jenkins, especially because he's somebody who's known as a striker. I think he's a really well-polished striker, and he has a lot of power. He's got really good kicks. I think that he wins this fight however he wants against Don Shainis. It just becomes an issue to me with Jenkins is we have so many fighters to pay up for, and he's 33% owned. I don't think I could match the field on his ownership, but he's going to be in my player pool. I'm just going to be a little bit underweight to him.
Yeah, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second with Shainis. Now, Jack Jenkins, man, I'm billboard material with these names here. He did land 4 takedowns on the Dana White Contender Series fight. But if you look at his regional tape, it's just mostly striking. He has good cardio. Now, here's the issue. I couldn't really find them, but there was no tape on it. But back in 2017, he has 2 professional losses. Both are by submission. Now, if you look at his regional tape, his defensive grappling and his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu actually looked okay, but it does worry me that he does have 2 losses by submission. And Shainis is just an aggressive wrestler. That's basically what he is. He's gonna get in on those legs, try to get you down to the mat. He's not a very good striker, but I think he could have one of those moments in this fight. Now, Jenkins is minus 125 inside the distance here. He has better metrics. He's the better fighter everywhere, I think. But I'm not going to discount Shainis. I think he has a small path here. And when you're getting down to the nitty gritty of these, Volkanovski, Elvis, Brenner, Oliveira, whatever, I don't mind taking a shot on Shainis just on the chance that Jenkins has been submitted before. Is it a likely path to victory? Absolutely not. I think Jenkins probably finishes him here, but just anything can happen. And this is, if Shainis does win, he does have a grappling path to victory.
All right. So maybe I'll, when I rerun lineups after this, maybe I'll go from none of Shainis, 5% or something like that. And there we go. And then if Shainis ends up winning and I hit a GPP, then I will give you no credit for it, but you can feel good about yourself if that's the case.
I won't chase the credit. I'll just, cry about it.
Perfect by me. That's generally what I want out of my co-hosts. A few fights left to hit on here. Next one, Loma Lookboonmee against Elise Reed. Elise Reed is terrible, but she has no real redeeming attributes to her MMA game. And I think there's a sneaky upside in Loma in this spot. She is my favorite contrarian spend up option. And I know we have a projected for 26% ownership, but just knowing how the field reacts to these spots, Loma's not going to be popular. People are not going to play her. At least that's my opinion. I don't think we're going to see people play her. We very rarely see women's MMA fights when there's an expensive fighter with terrible inside the distance odds at somebody that people like to pay up for. Here's why I think that Loma is interesting in tournaments. In her last couple of wins, we've seen her get her wrestling going. Denise Gomes, she landed 4 takedowns in that fight. Against Sam Hughes, she landed 4 takedowns. Now, Sam Hughes, who was taken down 4 times by Lookboonmee, when she fought against Elise Reed, she took Elise Reed down 4 times. The advantage that we're going to see Loma have in the wrestling department, to me, is significant in this matchup. Now, she doesn't have to go to its win. She has a really big striking advantage as well. This could be a spot, though, where she rinse and repeats takedowns and has a really big score, and people are just not on her for tournaments. So this is my favorite spend-up contrarian option on the slate, like I said. Are you willing to pay up for, or are there just too many pay-up options and you look elsewhere?
I agree with you. That is a very sneaky contrarian option because Elise Reed, like you mentioned, is awful. She defends takedowns at 50%. The 2 times she's lost has come via ground and pound. Now, Loma, she tends to put herself in some stupid spots sometimes, but she has been landing takedowns. She has pretty good output, 4.21 significant strikes per minute. She lands almost 2 takedowns for 15 minutes. She's tiny. That's the only bad thing I would say here. Reed's going to be 2 inches bigger. She's got a bigger reach, but I don't think it really matters. Reed, women, low-level women's MMA, these fighters don't use their reach or they should. So yeah, I think, there is legitimate, I wouldn't say legitimate, but there is a decent shot that Loma could finish inside the distance with some wrestling upside here and be a pretty sneaky option to score over 100 points here. And I also see Eric Lindquist in chat, your other co-host. Greg has making co-host cry sort of a specialty. Difference between me and you is I have way thicker skin. I started the show by calling Islam Makhachev Makak, and it didn't faze me. You'd be in shambles, Eric. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing too is Eric is also an actual criminal, which we don't really talk about enough on this channel. But it's like a massive headache when he goes on vacation. Like you have to work around that. He's not. He's on the no-fly list, so it takes him a really long time to get back. And we were trying to recently set up this because the Super Bowl is coming up. Gronk is doing this kick, where if he makes a field goal, everybody on FanDuel gets like $10 million allocated to everybody. And the reason we couldn't do this is true, 100% true. The reason we couldn't do this is because the only way to get access to a field goal post is if you go to a school, and Eric is not allowed within 200 yards of the school. If it wasn't for that, we would have been able to do this. And this is something that like really impacted the bottom line of the company, but these are the things you have to deal with when you're working with somebody like Eric Lindquist.
Yeah, the only redeeming quality for him is he is very photogenic for the promos. So we get his goofy mug on the promo, sells. But other than that,
yeah, it does help us sell some referrals from time to time. So we do get him on the looking surprised and whatever it is he's looking at in the pictures when we capture them. That's how we get some of those photos that help us move some BetMGM sponsors. Which, by the way, also that's another way that you guys get really cheap free access to all of our tools. Just sign up at BetMGM using our link. You only have to make a $10 deposit on BetMGM. That gets you 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Also, your first bet when you sign up with our link, if it loses, you're going to get a bonus bet of up to $1,000. So really good way to just get in the door also with cheap access to our tools. Like I said before, PrizePicks is the sponsor. I know a lot of you, though, like myself, you might be living in a state where you get access to BetMGM, but don't get access to PrizePicks. We've got a deal for both of them. Sign up at PrizePicks using our link, 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum. Same deal for BetMGM. Sign up 1 month free. Couple of fights left here to target. Next one, Shane Young versus Blake Bilder. In some ways, I feel the same about this fight as I do about the Culibao Baghdasarian fight in terms of I don't have a real strong lean on who wins this fight, but I think the winner has a little bit more scoring upside than in the Culibao Baghdasarian fight. So in the mid-range, I'm okay with getting some exposure to it, but I don't really have a strong lean, and I'm not going to be heavy on either of them. It's just going to be in my player pool.
Yeah, I don't have a very strong lean either. Bilder coming off the Contender Series, like you just never know the level of these fighters coming off the Contender Series. Like that, like we've talked about it, this show is just like a stable for Dana White to get 12-12 fighters onto his roster. He won quickly by rear naked choke against Alexander Morgan. He's aggressive. He has good Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but he's also very hittable. Shane Young, kind of the same way. He lands 5.2 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 5. Like he's very hittable. He hasn't fought in almost 2 years. He took a couple years off after back-to-back losses. I was actually on Shane Young when he got knocked out by Ludovic Klein. That was a sad day. Klein landed a great head kick there. If that fight got out of the first round, I think Shane Young would have taken over there. The thing is, like both of these fighters compared to the Culibao fight, is they're both aggressive. You could see a little bit higher scoring here. Yeah, I just think like for them to be optimal, both of them are pretty dependent on a finish, and I just don't know if they're going to finish here. So like my preferred side is Bilder just because he's cheaper and there aren't many dogs that you really can trust. You can really trust him there. But I think, with his Brazilian jiu-jitsu, possible wrestling upside, I think if he does win, he has a little bit higher ceiling in terms of points in a decision.
And now let's hit on the final fight of the night, and that is Zubairo Tukhugov taking on Elvis Brenner / Elvis Oliveira. Now, this has been a absolute headache of a fight from a back-end perspective. The reason being, midway through the week, DraftKings changed his name from Elvis Brenner to Elvis Oliveira. So whether his name is Elvis Brenner or Elvis Oliveira, whatever he wants to go by, I think he's going to lose in this fight. So Tukhugov, there's been a little bit of line movement against him just because he missed probably a terrible weight miss. So Tukhugov was having issues making featherweight, so he moves up to lightweight. So he goes from being a 145er to a 155er and doesn't even come close to making 155 in his first fight at lightweight. He weighs in at 157.5, so 2.5 pounds away from the 155 limit there. And on one hand, maybe that's a little bit concerning, but he has such big advantages basically everywhere, in my opinion, in this matchup. Like, I guess Brenner is live for a sub in some way, but I think Tukhugov knocks him out fairly early. I think that the only thing that we have to talk about here is the salary of him. It's super hard to get up to the salary. I'd much rather play Islam Makhachev. I feel really confident he wins. It's just going to be hard for me to play him in DFS because of his price point.
Yeah, 9,600. Like, I'd much rather play Islam just like you. The thing is, like, Brenner comes from these Brazilian regional scenes that I haven't even heard of. And like in most of these, like you look at most of his fights, he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner, and his Brazilian jiu-jitsu doesn't even look that good. You know what I mean? So like, I think Zubira takes him down, no problem. I think he finishes him. Just a question of like, who do you think's going to have a better chance of being optimal, Zubira or Islam? And I think it's going to be Makhachev. So like, yeah, I think, normally you see the most expensive fighter on the slate be fairly popular. I don't think he's going to be very popular at all. Looking at
our
24%.
Yeah,
24%.
Yeah. And then on the comeback, we've got only 2 fighters on the entire slate project for less than 10% ownership. One is Elvis Oliveira. The other one is Don Shainis. So other than that, everybody picking up double-digit ownership. And I'm going to be under that. I'm not going to play any shares of Oliveira today. So if he wins, my lineups are screwed right away. But I'm not going to play somebody who I think is no real advantages on paper against Tukhugov in this spot. So
was there a late dropout in this fight? Because this matchup makes no sense.
There might have been a couple of weeks ago, at least not at this time that I started looking into the fight. But it is, if you look at Tukhugov has generally had, not that he's fighting like highly ranked fighters or anything, but number one, he is really talented and he generally does fight against at least decent competition. His last fight was a win over Ricardo Ramos, and Ramos is really good. His fight before that, he fought against Hakeem Dawodu. Dawodu also really good. Before that, he fought Kevin Aguilar. All right, Aguilar isn't particularly good. Fight before that, Leron Murphy, though. Murphy's a really good prospect. Before that, he fought Hanato Moicano. And all of a sudden, they're like, hey, here's this dude whose name changes halfway through the week on DraftKings. So we're not exactly sure what he calls himself. So this is like a crazy step down in competition for Tukhugov. Arguably the easiest fight he's had since entering the UFC. And I expect him to roll in this matchup. It's just the price tag's a little steep.
Yeah, I think you can get him inside the distance still at plus money on some books too, which is, not financial advice, but
yeah, well, I think it's plus.
I saw it was plus 120 on DraftKings this morning, but it moved to even money.
It is weird because some of the inside the distance props have moved in favor of Tukhugov, while also the money line has moved against him. As I think people are overreacting to the weight miss, at least relevant to this matchup. Like, I don't think he's going to have any trouble winning. Is there anything else you want to add about this card? We've gone through all the fights now.
Think so. It's just, again, if you have a lean on an underdog here, you play the guy. I think, there's a couple that you feel at least semi-confident. There's obviously that punt range that you just, I did get a couple questions actually stacking the main event, Makhachev and Volkanovski. I'm staying away from that. I just think it's going to be one-way traffic, or Volkanovski wins by late KO and it, won't score that great with the two of them.
It's fine in cash games, not in tournaments.
Yeah.
Andrew Jensen said he was initially expected to fight Joel Alvarez. I would have favored him pretty heavily against Alvarez. Alvarez has 0 takedown defense.
Yeah. He's awful on the mat.
I think it actually might be literally 0. I'm going off the top of my head, but I'm almost positive Joel Alvarez has never successfully defended a takedown in the UFC. Let me pull this up really quickly before we finish, because if I don't look up this stats, Mike, it's going to drive me crazy.
I fought Arman Sarukian, right? Yeah, Joel Alvarez. I have him. He has not defended a takedown. No, he hasn't.
Yeah, he's 0% takedown defense in the UFC. And by the way, he was really popular in that fight against Arman Sarukian. That was one of my favorite UFC slates of all of last year. A chalky Joel Alvarez with 0% takedown defense.
7,200, and he was like 40% against Arman Sarukian, who held his own against Islam Makhachev wrestling.
Yeah, I think that was one of the only GPPs I won last year was for MMA was on that slate. So anyway, I would have liked to have seen the return of Joel Alvarez, but that is going to do it for us today, guys. If you have not done it, thank you for sticking with us tonight. On your way out, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck and have a great weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl.
Good luck, everybody. Go Chiefs.
go.